forests. It's not just about money from the trees. It's about protecting the other things that are out there and giving them a more diverse and healthy forest to live in.
Hey folks, Flo here at Scaling Up 2024. I'm here with Lacey Rose, who's a county forester in the county of Renfrew, which, as I said to you just a minute ago, I find very exotic. But before we go into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background story, which you shared on stage earlier, and is very, I would say, inspiring. So what's your story, Lacey?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little isolated mining town in Labrador. There was no forestry where I grew up. I didn't know that it was a career option or that wood even came from trees. But through circumstance and a few influential people in my life, I did end up pursuing a career in forestry, went to university, and have been working in the field ever since. So I did go from having a negative connotation associated with cutting trees that I got as a kid from a movie called Fern Gully to now as the person who actually facilitates the management of forests.
And so what was the moment when you sort of had an aha, where you thought, something that you may have thought before wasn't true, and that changed your whole outlook, I suppose, on the industry and maybe even the world?
Yeah, so it was actually when I started working for the forest industry that I realized that, oh wow, they really do put a lot of care, thought, and effort into the management of forests. So I made it all the way through my Bachelor of Science in Forestry, still with this negative attitude towards cutting trees. I was set that I wanted to be a wildlife biologist and work with protecting values in forests, but I couldn't land a job in that. So I ended up in the forest industry, and that's when I had this wow, okay, these are the people who actually are doing it all and taking care of forests, but managing them at the same time.
Forest management is precisely where I wanted to go. We often hear that in the context of fires in Canada, and of course we've had horrible seasons the last, let's say, few summers. What solutions does forest management really concretely bring to that problem and perhaps to others?
Yeah, so a managed forest is a healthy forest, and I see this already in my span of my career. The impacts of climate change are already visible, and by managing forests, we make them more healthy by taking out the damaged, suppressed, or diseased trees and leaving the healthier ones to grow further or to regenerate that next forest. So that every action that we take in forest management is based on science, research, experience, and we are trying to emulate natural disturbance so that we can replace that fire. And in our case, where I work, it's mostly wind damage that we see, ice damage, flooding, and things like that. So we're trying to do the same thing as Mother Nature, but to reduce the impacts associated with natural disturbance, like you said, fire.
Right, and I understand that industries also have a role to play. I mean, we've heard today about the manufacturing sector, the construction industry, even architectural design using wood. Could you speak a little bit to that?
So the limiting factor right now in managing forests is that we don't have a home for that lower quality, or previously known as pulpwood, material. And that's what we need to be taking out of the forest to reduce risk of fire, to improve the health of the forest. So the biomass industry has a huge role to play in that, and that's where we hope to see, as foresters, more markets for that material, so we can do more forest management in areas that we currently can't because we can't market the material.
And finally, in your story earlier, you called yourself a tree hugger. I'm wondering if you still consider yourself a tree hugger, perhaps a different kind of tree hugger, but also what are your dreams today now that you have more lived experience and experience within the industry itself?
I am absolutely still a tree hugger. I cannot walk by a big, beautiful tree in the forest without giving it a hug. But I no longer think that hugging trees and protecting means don't touch. We have to make sure that our forests have value for them to be protected and for them to have value as forests instead of another use like development and agriculture. Mm-hmm. So that's the role that I hope to play, is by increasing the value of our forests, but also my dream for the future is for the public and others who have an interest in forests to see these good news stories and know the amount of effort and time that goes into making sure that forests are managed in a sustainable manner.
And how do we get them to see those stories?
Listen to my presentation, I guess. I don't know. Personally, I spend a lot of time going out to schools, talking to kids, making sure that I get as many teachers on board as possible, because the only thing that I learned in grade school about forestry was from an economics textbook with a picture of a clear cut saying forestry is important to the economy, or logging, that's probably what they called it. So making sure that the messages are delivered to all Canadians that forestry is not only an important part of our economy, but it also plays a huge role in protecting the health, viability of forests, but also all of the other things that live in the forest and values associated with the forest. It's not just about money from the trees, it's about protecting the other things that are out there and giving them a more diverse and healthy forest to live in.
Wonderfully explained. Thank you very much, Lacey.
Thank you.
Pleasure speaking with you.
You too.